This is Chapter 4, Part 2. We left off last time talking about various types of socialization. So although we learn the most when we're young, we also see adult socialization, so I sort of touched on that before. That especially in our dynamic, ever-changing society, for example, people might have to change careers a couple of times in their lives and kind of start in a different field, and you have to learn the way things are done in that particular office or that particular setting. So that's socialization, when you learn how things are done and when you're dealing with other people and how to behave and interact with other people correctly. Well, that's socialization. So it happens when we're grown-ups too. Now, this is an interesting criminological idea, which doesn't get too much direct attention in the criminological research, but it's an interesting idea. It's a simple one, but interesting. One way to explain deviance is in terms of inadequate socialization. So the idea behind this perspective, and by the way, all of this chapter really comes a lot from one of the founders of sociology, Émile Durkheim, French sociologist from about 100 years ago, who claimed his theory suggested or claimed that humans were naturally rule followers. We're kind of a group-oriented people or species. We're social species, and we're sort of motivated to cooperate and get along with people. And so it comes naturally to us to come up with rules, teach those rules, and follow those rules. And so the idea is that if you don't have rules to follow, strong rules, authoritative rules that you're motivated to follow, then you kind of fall back on your own natural desires. And sometimes those natural desires can be selfish and not considerate of other people and not courteous and not thoughtful, and that you can do things that other people don't like. You may enjoy them and you may get something out of them, but other people dislike them. And so the idea here is that maybe one reason why people do bad things, things that other people disapprove of, is that they really haven't been taught properly what the rules are, the norms, and have not been taught in a way where they have come to follow those norms. And so they sometimes deviate. They sometimes do things that other people don't appreciate. Okay, a person, and I think this is a very interesting idea, that a person can act deviantly if they belong to a counterculture. So let's say you belong to that criminal street gang that I mentioned in the last video segment. That we know from studying criminal gangs that you're taught that it's a good thing to stand up for your gang and to, for example, engage in retaliatory violence against a rival gang that has hurt your gang in some way. So let's say if a rival gang kills one of your men, in a gang counterculture, it would be considered a good thing, a heroic thing, to go out and out of revenge to kill one of your enemy's gang members as an act of retaliation. So gang members look at themselves as being soldiers and fighting wars with their enemies, rival gangs. And so when a soldier kills an enemy combatant, they're considered a hero. That's bravery. That's a good thing. That's conforming to the rules of your own group. That's conforming type behavior, following the rules. But the rules happen to be rules of this particular group, rules that are inconsistent with mainstream cultural rules, norms, which are that you don't, go retaliate and kill someone who's killed one of your friends, that killing people in that manner is inappropriate, it's criminal, it's against the law, and you should be punished for it. That's what the mainstream culture says. So it's an interesting thing about when you belong to a counterculture, if being a follower and following your counterculture's rules makes you deviant in the eyes of mainstream society. So what's conforming behavior in your group is deviant behavior to the mainstream. So that's sort of an interesting thing. That's one of the ways we can explain deviance. Why do people kill each other? Well, because the group that they're a part of says they should. And then it's a good thing, and that you're a good person if you stand up, if you're brave, if you come forward and act in a courageous way to kill the enemy, right? So that's an interesting dynamic there. Now, this is also a widely used term within sociology. It comes from the same tradition, flows from Durkheim, this term of social control. What we mean by this is the process by which society influences individual or group behavior. So a key idea within sociology is that we influence each other as human beings. That why do I behave like I do? Well, to some extent because other people want me to behave that way, or they push and pull me to behave that way. And so sociology definitely focuses a lot on how we influence each other to do things. That I don't do things just purely out of my own independence, but that I'm influenced by others. Now, they use this strong term, social control. Control sounds kind of strong, but just think of it as social influence coming from other people. And you can influence either individuals or you can influence groups of people, because of course, in society, we sort of exist at different levels. Sometimes we're individuals, sometimes we're part of a group. And so this influence can happen at different levels. But let's get into some more specifics about this social control. Now, I think the way I put this is a little bit different than the textbook, but stick with me here because I think I'm a little bit clearer. You have formal control and informal social control. Informal social control is control that comes from your peers, people who are on the same level socially as you are. So by peers, we're talking a lot of times about, your friends or people, classmates, people from the same year in school as you. And people like that don't have authority over you. The way that they exert social influence on you is by things like, well, if you don't do this, I won't be your friend anymore. So threatening to end a friendship, or friends, peers will gossip about each other, and they'll talk nasty about each other behind their backs. And one of the things that gossiping does is it sort of can influence you. You might say, well, I don't think I should do this thing because I know everybody's going to disapprove of it, and they're all going to talk about it and talk about me and put me down behind my back. And I don't want that. I don't want all these people disliking me, ridiculing me, rejecting me. So usually friends use these sort of social pressures. Peer pressure is that common term that we use as an example of this kind of thing. That's what people on the same level tend to do to influence each other. Maybe they'll pull you aside. Someone will pull you aside and say, hey, listen, I really didn't like what you did back there. I wish you wouldn't do that again. So sometimes people just talk to you, or lecture you, or get after you, or may threaten more that I'm not going to hang out with you, or that kind of thing. So it's the social pressure that comes from people on the same level as you. That's called informal social control. Now, formal social control is the social influence that comes from authorities, that comes from people who have power and authority over you. And usually this term formal social control gets used sometimes to refer to the criminal justice system, because obviously a police officer, a prosecuting attorney, a judge, a prison warden, they all have authority over you. If you are under the supervision of the criminal justice system, if you've been arrested and you're being processed by the criminal justice system, all these people have authority over you, and they can use their authority to try to change your behavior. So the judge might say, okay, I'm going to give you 6 months in jail. Hopefully that's going to teach you a lesson so you won't commit this crime ever again. So the judge, he or she is using their power and authority to try to change your behavior. That's social control, but it's formal social control because it's coming from above. Now, it's not only the criminal justice system or the government that has this sort of formal social control. Think of some other examples. Let me jump in here, but think of some other examples. It's, again, as long as it's coming from a position of authority, we can call that form of social control. So if your boss says, listen, you really haven't been carrying your load here at work, and this is a warning. I'm giving you a warning right now. Either get your act together or we're going to have to terminate you, right? So that's a boss using his or her authority and power to try to straighten out your work performance. Now, I've been focusing on the negatives, but it can also be, a social control can also be positive. So that boss can say, hey, listen, you are doing a fantastic job. I am really happy with your performance around here. I'm giving you a raise. See, so it can be rewards. Again, it's rewarding your behavior to try to encourage you to keep up the good work in the future, right? So you can reward or punish socially, but we tend to focus, in this class, on negative social control because we're often talking about the criminal justice system, and it's kind of unfortunate, but the criminal justice system a lot of times falls back on negative forms of formal social control, punishment, to try to straighten out your behavior. So unfortunately, we don't get paid because we stay out of trouble and follow the law every day. It'd be nice if we got a check for every day that we stay out of trouble and follow the law, but usually we don't get rewarded for good behavior that much, but we do get punished for bad behavior, right? So that's why I do tend to give negative examples. So once again, formal social control, anybody controlling you from a position of authority. Again, these definitions may vary a little bit from the textbook, but stick with me on this. I think I do a little bit clearer job. Not that the textbook's bad or anything. Okay, the criminal justice system is perhaps the ultimate form of social control, because here we're talking about taking away your freedom, locking you up. That's pretty extreme form of social control. We don't like your behavior, so to try to change your behavior, we're going to lock you up. So criminal justice system is a very good example, strong example of what we mean by formal social control. Now, agents of ideological social control, that's sort of a handful right there. These are people that shape the consciousness of members of society. So really, these are the people who are socializing you as you're growing up. It happens a lot, especially when you're a kid, but it also happens when you're an adult. And these are the people who are teaching you right from wrong, right behavior from wrong behavior, and what's right and wrong in different situations. Because of course, it's a subtle thing. I've mentioned several different situations here. What's acceptable in one situation may not be in another situation. So if you're hanging out with your buddies in the locker room, you may be able to use bad language that you wouldn't want to use around your grandma, type of thing, right? So it might be okay and acceptable to use bad language over here, but not over there. So, so that's why I talk about different situations. Anyway, there's people who teach you all these things, and you can really think of them as being agents. It's their job to teach you right from wrong. And so anybody who does that, you could refer to them as these agents of ideological social control. So ideological, why do they put it in there? Well, ideology is just sort of, the individual rules, they're specific and they deal with specific issues. Don't burp in public, falling back to that example. That's specific. But ideological would be bigger picture, is like philosophies, like worldview. So an example of ideological would be something like, listen, you need to live your life so that you show respect to other people, that you live your life in a way where you treat other people like they want to be treated. Golden rule, for example. See, that's philosophy, that's worldview, that's big picture. And the specific rules, specific norms may flow from that big picture outlook, big picture philosophy. So when they say ideological, they're just saying that there are people who are in charge of teaching you not only the specific rules, but kind of the big picture, right and wrong. So this would be parents who teach you big picture. Teachers sometimes teach you big picture. You can get it from media. People will sometimes teach you big picture. You can get this from sort of religious organizations. Of course, religious organizations take big picture view of things, teach you a worldview. So religions would be an important source of what's right and wrong and how to behave in different situations. So any of these individuals from these different organizations who are teaching you right from wrong, we could call them these agents of social control. And if it's big picture stuff, it'd be ideological. Let's see. Let me stop there. We'll get back into it, part 3.